So, hello and thank you again. Thank you to all the members of the Arizona Glass Alliance for welcoming us today. My name is Marie-Hélène No, and I am the Cultural Activities Coordinator at La Guilde. I would like to start by recognizing that La Guilde celebrates the cultural traditions and creative expressions of all Indigenous peoples of Canada and artists of fine crafts. La Guilde is situated on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and water of Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. La Guilde respects the past, present, and future connections with all Indigenous and diverse communities of Canada. La Guilde is a non-profit organization that aims to preserve, promote, and increase awareness for Inuit art, First Nation art, and fine craft from Canada. La Guilde was founded in 1906 by two women from the English community of Montreal, Alice Peck and May Phillips. In 1949, La Guilde was the first organization to start the Inuit art market. Inuit art is a major part of our permanent collection at La Guilde. La Guilde has a center of documentation as well as archives available for consultation. We organize temporary exhibitions and cultural activities such as today related to our programming. La Guilde also has an art gallery that brings together the work of established and emerging artists. Donald Robertson is actually amongst the glass artists whose work is exhibited at the gallery. For more information about La Guilde or about the works in the gallery available for acquisition, its temporary exhibition and its activities, I invite you to visit our website, laguilde.com. La Guilde currently presents the exhibition Chromatic, which is an evocation to the rainbow of Endra Tutto Bene, or the translated in Quebec to Ça va bien aller. Everything will be fine. It will be presented until April 25, followed by the second installment of the pop-up series, Horizon, an exhibition that is focused exclusively on Inuit art. And in the context of our new exhibition also, Pudlo Pudlat Above the Limits, La Guilde also organized the artist talk Discovering Comics with artist Napachi Folger that will take place on Wednesday, April 28th at 6 p.m. Montreal time. You may register for this activity through our Facebook event. It's also free for everyone. So Donald Robertson's work has been exhibited in galleries in the US and Canada, as well as Europe and Asia, and can be found in many museums, corporate and private collections. Recognized for his masterful and distinctive approach to lost wax glass casting, his sculptures reference history and mythology and explore the links between the material and spiritual. His professional practice also focuses on teaching, and he is one of the principal teachers at Espace Vert, a glass program in Montreal. Teaching there since 1989, his pedagogy includes kiln casting and cold working glass, as well as the technical aspect of the medium. I am glad to introduce you to Donald Robertson. I'd like to say also in Montreal, we have a curfew, so we will respect the 1 hour programming. So I'll let Mr. Robertson take it away.
But thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you. It's a great opportunity for me to talk to people who I probably would never get an opportunity to speak to. I had a very good introduction from Marie-Hélène, so I don't think I need to say too much more about that, but I'm going to start right into my presentation because I think time is probably short. Hi, everybody. So I live probably what you're trying to avoid. I live in the Laurentians north of Montreal, and we have a lot of weather where we live. So this is the kind of seasons we run through, and we have a lot of humidity and water. This is the winter, spring, and our summer comes quick and it comes strong. And we live in the middle of a forest. I live with Susan Edgerly, who you have met before. So we're running through the seasons just so you get an idea of where I live. And then we're back again to winter. So I live with Susan Edgerly. She's my partner of some over 35 years, who I met in school. And while we live together, we do work separately. But on occasion, we work together. Here's a piece of Susan's called Ephemeral. She does this is her work. I know that she presented to you a little earlier on, so you're familiar with her. This is one of the pieces that we did collaborate on in the Mont Tremblant Casino, north of Montreal. It consists of hundreds of pieces of pâte de verre. There's one piece in front, and there's another one further back behind it, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things we can do. All right. So as Mary Ellen said, I didn't know she was going to introduce my teaching, but I do teach at Espace Fair, and I've been teaching there for over 30 years. It's a 3-year college glass program, which people receive a diploma when they finish. I mostly teach the second years when I'm there. Here I am in the cold studio. Here are the students working. These are a group of my second-year students working away. I really love teaching, to be honest. And here they are. I'm teaching them also. I teach them pâte de verre. They're in the flame working studio. The school is very well equipped, and it just specializes in glass. Here's the kiln room. There's over 10 teachers there, each with their speciality that teach the students. I also teach lost wax casting, which is what I do in my own personal work, and some technology classes. We are pouring glass color we made and hand rolling it into sheets. So this is a lot of fun. So this is one of my workbenches at home, where I sit out and look out on the land. I want to say to you, I'm an artist and I work with glass, but I've worked with other materials before. Preceding my time in glass, I've had I had other training in other medium. So I do a lot of drawing. I've done ceramics, and I still do some ceramics, but mostly before glass, and even today I do a lot of metal work. This is a piece of bronze. It's a cast bronze wheel. It's 4 feet in diameter, and it's called Sisyphus, and it just rolls around in a circle and comes back to the same place. It looks like it's going somewhere, but it doesn't. If you know the legend of Sisyphus, he was cursed to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. I never reached the top. So how did I come into glass? Well, back in 1983, I went to Mexico to San Miguel Allende, which you probably know. It's a lovely little colonial town, to study lithography and bronze casting at the Bellas Artes. And while there, I was there for some months, and while there, I discovered there was a small glass factory in the town making tumblers out of recycled glass, water tumblers. So I went down with one of my molds and spoke to the owner and said, could you blow glass into this plaster mold for me? And he said, sure. I said, how much? And he said, well, it'll cost you the time I have to stop my production to do it. And I said, okay. And what he was doing, the production was, I didn't know much about glass, but they were blowing 6 glasses a minute without breaking a sweat by hand. So this is what they blew for me way back when in well, I guess it's 1984. And I'll tell you, it was a revelation to me. I was hooked. So I decided to return to Montreal, and I found a Sheridan College where I went to study glass, and I met Susan. Now I'm going to tell you about, I've told you about how I came to these materials, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about the source of a lot of my ideas and inspiration. When I did my first studies in college in, I guess it was 1970, that's a while ago, I found out in second year that you could get credit for traveling and studying. And I thought, wow, that's for me. And in those days, it was pretty easy to travel. You could buy a $100 ticket, what they call an open ticket on standby, and you could just get on a plane and fly to Europe. And just, I don't know if you remember those, any of you ever took advantage of those tickets, but they were fantastic. You just went to the airport, first seat that was open, away you went. So I went to Europe for a year, and about 9 months of that year I spent in Greece. And while there, I visited all the archaeological sites all over the mainland, as many as I possibly could. And I went to the museums and looked at all the antiquities. I didn't own a camera. I could draw, and I did drawings of all these works. And I will say that I didn't really know what I was looking at. I was about 20 years old. And it was only much later that I began to understand the meaning of all this work. During this trip, I also made a side trip, which I actually spent quite a bit of time on Crete in the winter, I think it was the winter of 1972. And while there, I discovered the Bronze Age Minoan civilization, of which this is a kind of a ring. It gives you an idea of their artwork. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's quite well known now. Here's a piece of work at glass that I did in 1988, derived from that experience. I call this Europa, and it's a figure leaping the bull. It's about 7 feet tall and 5 feet long. It's in steel, pâte de verre, copper, and glass. Pâte de verre is glass, of course, but I don't know if you can see that. After that, okay, so now that I've told you about my inspirations, I'm going to speak to you about one series of my work. I actually work in series, but in parallel, meaning that I just don't work on one piece and only in the same kind of work all the time. I'm often working on several kinds of work and over many years. I will make pieces, but I continue the series often over many years. This is a series of helmets, which might be some of my best known work. I don't think there's very many went to the United States. The bulk of these were sold throughout Europe via Venice, from a gallery in Venice. But what I'm going to do with this work is I'm going to show you a few examples, and I want to tell you what inspired the work. And then at the end, I'll show you a little bit about how I make it. Very brief thing. The actual work, this work was inspired when I went to visit an exhibition called Thracian Gold. I believe it was in 1987 in Montreal, perhaps 1987, I think so. And it was very interesting. Thrace was the homeland of Alexander the Great. And so I went into the Museum of Civilization, and they had a room full of marvelous gold pieces. And then I walked a little further on, and I found room after room of arms and armor. And I thought to myself at the time, and it was marvelously made, as you can see the piece on the right, beautifully decorated. And I thought, how unusual that they would take, the fruit of their art and their knowledge and create these implements of conflict and destruction. And that sort of sat in my head. And then a few years later, it came to me when I was reading due to current events, and I saw that in my mind that nothing had actually changed today from then. And this was 2,500 years ago, and essentially we're still in the same situation. Always different players and always different rooms, but always the same situation. This piece is called Medusa. The helmets themselves, the original helmets are meant to protect, but these helmets, they look like they could protect you, but they actually can't. It's a paradox. The smallest blow will shatter them into pieces. It's my way of saying that I don't think that this way of resolving conflicts is a very good solution. This piece is Medusa, and it has a crown of forged iron snakes. This piece is Charge. And I have a lot of fun making pieces like this. It was a pile of copper sheet that I cut out the horses on, all the same, and then I spread them so they became like a frieze in an Egyptian tomb. And I have a lot of fun with the metal and glass while I'm doing them. This piece here is one. These pieces were started actually in the New York Experimental Glass Works in New York City when it was on Mulberry Street. And I believe it was about 1991. One of the reasons I use glass for this work, and I really like to cast glass, is that you can see through one surface and into the other surface. In other words, if this was a bronze casting, you'd only see the surface of the piece. But because it's not bronze and it's glass, I can create another world of imagery on the interior of the work that you see through the piece too, and it could tell another story. Here is a series of drawings that were done to create the frieze in that helmet. These are actually the tracings that were transferred to the wax. So, okay, so if you look to you have to start at the bottom right because they're in reverse. But there's a couple who are farmers. It's very simple, and then the woman is pregnant, and he's off to do whatever he's going to do, some war for some reason or another. They always have good reason, and then in the back of the helmet, there's a lightning bolt just coming down. And then on the next side of the helmet, you see the chariot's return. He's on a shield. His wife is there. His child is there watching him. And at the last scene, it's sort of like a cartoon, is you have her training the son to continue the conflict and to avenge his father. And I did this piece to show that to me that nobody is innocent in these endeavors because it's just been a ceaseless cycle through time. You can see here in the piece, the horse coming back, he's on a shield, she's rending her hair, and there they are preparing for revenge. Freeze. Here's another piece where although that's basically what the subject is, but I will tell you that I have a lot of fun with these because I find glass is a very seductive medium. This piece here, I have this frieze of horses running across the crown. And what I really enjoy is, well, there's only 3 in the front, but the other 4 are in the back. But because it's transparent, I can put all these on and they all appear. This is another a similar piece, and this one's in the National Museum in Quebec City. This piece is called Dolphins, and it references traveling. One of the things on all these helmets, although the helmets are from 500 BC, they're the Corinthian helmets, the imagery I'm using on them comes from the Minoan era. It comes from the Bronze Age, and it predates the helmets by about 1,500 years, just to emphasize the continuity of what this is talking about. This one is called the Sentinel, just watching. This is Janus, the god of doorways, of beginnings and endings. He's not Greek at all, it's Roman, but I chose to portray him in this way. And here's a piece I call Memory. It's just dedicated to, the famous saying, if you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it. This is the memory of the person who wore the helmet. I had a lot of fun with this work. You can see in here, the face is in relief, but the ear is in intaglio on the inside of the helmet. So I enjoy this kind of negative, positive work. This piece here is called Cephalus, and it's about Alexander the Great's famous battle horse that never made it back, of course, and neither did he. This horse he raised from childhood. It was a wild horse that nobody could tame but him. And so that's about this. This piece is about that. It's a new series that I call the Sentinels. It's a different form. Now, here I have, you can see the same helmet, and you have the interior of the helmet. You have a field on the interior of the helmet, and this horse is engraved over it. Excuse me, I need water. That's better. Okay, so now what I'm going to come to is how I make these helmets. The original helmet that these are derived from is in the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, in the Met. And I saw it in 1991, and it inspired me to go on and make these helmets. No two is exactly the same. They were made in very simple plaster molds with the simple principle of plaster and water don't mix. Wax and water don't mix, so you pour in the wax and then you can release it from the plaster afterwards. So I cut them and I assemble them and I model on the surface. Here's a detail of the face being modeled inside the wax, and I engrave the surfaces. This gives you an idea of what the glass would look like. It's hard to anticipate what the glass will look like when you're working in an opaque medium. But this is another view of that helmet, which has been, you can see all the different pieces are all assembled with all the different kinds of wax. Here is another photo. This is that group that I was starting called the Sentinels. It's larger, but I can continue on with how I make them. The actual modeling and molding before they go in the kiln is really not that, it's about half the process. The other half starts when I finish firing the piece. Here I am checking to see if the glass has gone down into the mold. I suspect you all know about all this stuff, but I'm just showing you anyhow. And then once it comes out of the kiln, it's time to start doing the cold working and finishing the glass. A lot of my glass finishing is done in a pretty old ancient technique. I use abrasive grains and glass mullers, meaning glass blocks, to grind the exterior surface of the glass very smooth. That way I'm able to polish the surface and see the images on the inside later on. I learned this method of working in Czechoslovakia in 1991, 92. Here you see the metal plume that I'm making for the helmet. The helmet in the back, you see all the lines. Those lines are when the helmet is wet, I can't see the surface, so I put those lines on and I cut them off with my abrasives. And when they're all gone, then I'll know I've covered the whole surface. It's very difficult to see a surface like that underwater. So here's the fun part where I'm preparing the helmet to receive the metal plume. This is always a very risky proposition, but I enjoy it. It's when the helmets come out of the kiln and I'm cold working them, when they go in, I'm treating the material as if I would treat bronze and metal, and it's poured and it's formed. But when it comes out, I treat it as if it's a piece of stone. And the first process is additive, and the later process is subtractive. And I cut away everything that I wish to cut away and reveal what I wish to reveal. This piece is called Icarus, and it's the story of Icarus and Daedalus. I imagine you know Icarus, his son, he warned him, don't fly too close to the sun, but he did, and he melted the wax of his wings, and the feathers fell off, and he plunged to his death in the sea. This would be the sentinel is his father watching. You have the sun on top, but for me, this is more an allegory for listen to your elders. You know, this is probably what this is more about, warning the impetuous youth that they should listen to what the older people are warning them to do, warning them not to do. Okay, here's a detail where you can see the feathers engraved on the inside of the piece. Now, those helmets are one series of work, and I started them in 1991. But I started casting glass, probably about 1984, with very little instruction. There weren't many people casting then, and certainly not people that I knew. I only had one teacher I know of who was casting, who showed me a little bit about it. And so I started to cast on my own. I did a lot of experimentation. I lost countless pieces, but I used the vessels to learn how to cast hollow. I always wanted to cast glass hollow, much as you would cast a bronze, because it was always important to me that you could see through the glass and into the core. And in doing that, you could reveal something else. Here, and you'll see in my vessels as I go along, almost all of them incorporate a spiral. And the spiral, to me, it's life. It comes from infinity, and it goes to infinity. It has a beginning that you can't see. It has an end that you can't see, and it just manifests in a certain period of time. So you'll see that that's a bit of my visual language. This is a piece that's actually part of a vessel series that's polished. It's polished. The top is polished in like a convex lens, and in the center of it is a concave lens. It's a bit reminiscent of a galaxy. It's in pâte de verre. So here are some of my first vessels. These vessels, I actually, when I make them, I look at them more as self-portraits or portraits of people. I've always felt the vessel, I've liked the metaphors of the vessel as a container, as people are often referred to as vessels, and we contain things. And what I liked about these pieces is that you could see the outside, but also enter into the inside through the walls of the vessel. As we enter into people through their eyes and so on and so forth, but you really can't see what's inside. But also at the same time, the vessel is not separate. It's open on the top, as everything I feel on Earth is joined together. Here's another piece where I'm using the quality of, it's called seeing, of using the quality of looking to the surface. All the decor, the motifs that you see are all on the interior of the piece. There's nothing on the outside. It's cut smooth. These ones are different in that the way they're cast, but what these are, I only have a few of these to show you, but they were a series of 10 vessels that I called the Voyage. And it was about a voyage of self-discovery and self-portraits of sort. So this one's called Catching. This one was called Taming. The same sort of idea as the first one I told you about. And this piece is called Returned. This is the last of the series. It's 10. The other ones, they start from a very smooth vessel, and they end up in this one, which is very rough on the outside, but smooth on the inside and full of light. This vessel was purchased by Joe and Anna Mandel, who are, I'm sure you know, who are great patrons of glass and collectors of art. And they were kind enough to purchase this piece way back when. And it's been donated with the rest of their collection to the Museum of Fine Arts here in Montreal, just across the street from me. Now, I'll move down the road because, as I said, I work in series, and this is quite a few years later after the other ones. Excuse me. And once again, it's a similar idea. The imagery you see is all contained within the vessel. These vessels, this vessel is probably about 16 inches to 18 inches tall. And it's all hand polished on the outside. My glassblower friends, they think I'm crazy when I do that, but they're probably right. But that's how I do it. And this one I call Dawn, but it always reminds me of Van Gogh's brushstrokes in his paintings. This is another piece. It's a kind of a self-portrait of myself when I was young. As a child, and I always built things, and nails were very important to me. They were a large part of my identity, I think. So here, this is a memorial to my nails. And here you have the nails that created it on the inside, and they're slowly rusting away and returning back to the earth that they came from. So next, I'm going to show you something else that came. I call those vessels that I just showed you image vessels. And from that, those pieces in the year 2000, not those per se, but there was other ones before. In the year 2000, Dome, France, French glass house, I don't know if you know it, but you probably do. They've been casting glass by the lost wax process, I believe, for over 100 years. And So over 100 years. So they invited me to design a piece for this collection, 12+1. It was a big honor to me, quite a surprise, came out of the blue. And I was the only North American they asked to contribute to this collection. So what I'm going to show you is how I got my idea, how I developed the piece, and talk to you a little bit about what happened afterwards. So first I looked through the catalog, saw what they could do, what I could do that was original that they hadn't done before. And then I thought about my time. I once again fell back on my travels in Europe, and I thought how important the Mediterranean was to all European civilization. So I went even further back, and I went back to search for my original forms from the early Cycladic figures. It was Bronze Age civilization that predated the Minoan civilization, the early Bronze Age. And these figures are really known. They were made in the thousands, and many artists have been influenced by them. I've seen a picture of this, the Lubinsky studio, the Lubinsky Brachova studio, and I've always found them wonderful pieces. So that gave me my form. Then I thought about, they were sea people. These people were from the Cycladic islands in Greece. They lived on the sea, and they gained their livelihood from the sea. So I looked at images of the ocean, and I remembered my time there, and I started to do some drawings, and I started to put it together. And I decided I would put the image of the sea into the vessel as a memory of the time that but you couldn't touch it, but you could reach back through the memory to touch these people. So I started to develop, I'll go through this rather quickly, but I made a plaster model, a template model that I filled with clay. From that, I did a series of negative and positive moldings in it, which created the exterior form for me to work with. Here you see the exterior form that was on the previous slide. With it, I used it to cast what I call the core print, which is for the interior of the glass. Here's the same image of the mold turned over. And what you see here is where the glass will go in. And this is the core print. Here you have the core print alone with the glass, the resulting piece of glass. When I sent my work to Dome, this is all I sent to Dome, and the scale drawings. They did all the work on making the piece. This piece, although I did everything in plaster and clay, they did this with rubber molds and lost wax. They created an edition of 120 pieces of this piece. It's called Coral. Now, it took over 4 years. I gave them the work in 2000. I heard almost nothing from them. It was amazing. Every once and then I get a little email or something, and I kept thinking, oh, this is dead in the water. Forget about this project. I'll tell you, I was not used to people that work so slow. They worked very slow, and I gathered very carefully. But then one day, 2004, I get an email saying the show is opened in Paris, and it went wonderfully. And then I didn't hear anything. So didn't hear anything from it. So luckily somebody I knew was there. I'd taken a picture, seen the show, took a picture and sent it to me. And there's my piece in the show. It was 12 designers plus 1 designer. So I guess they didn't want to say 13 because it was bad luck. All right. Now, this work piece I found out later, because I didn't know much about it, was shown all over the world in Dubai, Tokyo, Vogue. I had friends that traveled, and every now and then somebody would send me a picture of, oh, I saw it in an aquarium in Tokyo. Oh, it was very surprising. And then one day, out of the blue, I get a call from them at Dome. It's about a year after, about 2005, I think. And they said, would you like to do an artist demonstration for us? And I said, okay, sure. They said, we'll fly you down to Florida, to Boca Raton, and to California, and you just demonstrate how we get our work out of the molds and talk to the people there to give them an understanding of Pate Vert. So I did that, and I had a great time. But it was a really interesting experience for me, because in doing that, I found that they sold my whole edition in 1 year, which I hadn't known about, really, for almost $1 million. Then on top of that, they were selling this 120 pieces, each one of them, for about 4 times what I was making for one of my unique individual pieces, which was incredible to me. It really showed me the power of marketing. And I guess, and the other extraordinary thing about this, although they're not that expensive, I think, on the secondary market if you find them, is that one of these pieces sold in Monaco for Prince Rainier's Oceanographic Institute for a charity auction for 50,000 euros. That's more than I get for my work, let me say. But it was a very interesting experience. So I'm going to go back to my vessels, which I'm still merrily making along after that experience. These are spiral vessels. This one is miel, it means honey, lost wax cast, and I'm loving casting them from thick to thin. So I'm going to show you fairly fast. So here you are. These are quite large pieces, about 18 to 2 feet wide, and I've got the message that I have to wind it up. So while I'm making these, I was reading a book on divine proportion and the Fibonacci mathematical sequence that creates the spiral in the golden section. And so I thought, what if I apply it to one of my waxes that I use to make my vessels? So I did a little quick drawing and figured out a bit of math, and I cut it up. And much to my surprise, these carapaces reverse engineered into what was probably mankind's original vessel, a shell. With a shell, you could take water from the water hole and go drink it in the safety of a sheltered place. It may have led to civilization, for all I know. The other thing is the reassembling the wax could be, I found there was infinite possibilities. Then I could push the limits of my casting. This one I call open carapace. And I started to make them larger. This is a large carapace. And then larger again, another large carapace. I didn't continue making them for long because in the end they are shells and they are very difficult to make. But what attracted me to them is the beauty that this mathematical sequence could produce something like this. This is one of the last ones I made, and it's called Large Blue Spira, and it's made in pâte de verre. And the pâte de verre is, I love pâte de verre because of the bubbles in the glass and the way it diffracts the light. Now, I'm moving along here. I'm going to come to a last series of work on time. This was a show I did a number of years ago called Chronos. And it talks about time on different scales, from human scale, all different kinds of scales of time, because we live in human time, but there's many other sorts of time. You have here another view of the show. In the bottom, this piece here in the foreground in glass is called Moon Shadow, and it's about the phases of the moon. The piece in back is more about human time, and it's called Timeline, and it's the time it took me to. It's the time of the working draw. It's the working drawings it took me to produce the show in series. Up above, there's a piece that's about the tides. It's called 12. Here we have another view of the show, and I have this large pendulum about 4 feet across, made of offcuts of my work, and I call it industrial time. It's the time I worked. On the right, you see another set of work, which I will show you another image of, and these are my chronometers or geological timers. And so it's the time on it's to demonstrate time on a geological level. The left one, it's brine evaporating into minerals, salts. The one in the center is iron, nails reverting back to iron oxide. And the one on the right is silica sand, which will transform metamorphically into a big piece of glass. It's poetic. And this is the last piece I want to show in the show. It's called Block of Time. It's also another group of working drawings. And on the right is Totem, which speaks to the lifetime of a human being. So I'm coming to the end now. This was the invitation for the show, and it was called Ripple. The Guild has this piece on exhibition. It's about a frozen moment in time, as if a pebble was tossed in water and the ripples of light raced across the water. And it's the evidence of that small action. Here's a detail of it. As you see, most of the imaging, as usual, is on the interior of the work. This piece is called Shape of Water. and it's one of my more recent pieces. And it's speaking about water in the gaseous and fluid form, liquid and clouds. And then I think I'm at the end. And this is a detail shot of a piece up behind me. Up there, you'll see in the black, and it's called Coriolis. And it's about the way the rotation of the Earth causes the atmosphere to swirl and create macro weather patterns. All these last pieces have a lot to do with water, our planet, and our climate, which is what many people are thinking about today. And I think that's all I have to say. And I really would like to thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm sorry I had to rush so much, but now I hope we have time for a few questions. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Well, Donald, on behalf of the group, I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. It was really terrific to learn about you and your work and the various types of work that you do and the various series that you do. And as I said in the beginning, this has been the last of our Zoom events, and you really are taking us out on a real high note. This has been a fabulous presentation, and we all enjoyed it very much, and we thank you. We do have time for a couple of questions. You can either, people are usually pretty good about it. You can either, I'm gonna look at the chat here, and I don't have any questions yet, but I have compliments.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank you
Very much, and how fascinating it was, and what a terrific presentation it was. If anybody has a question, you can either type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, just physically unmute yourself and throw the question out.
I just wanted to say that seeing the process is so inspiring, and you're one of the best teachers at Espace Vert, and it's really incredible working with you.
Oh, merci, Ariel.
De rien.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question while other people are thinking. Well, what do you see coming down the pike in the future for you, Donald? Do you expect to continue to work on these series? Do you see new ones coming down?
Well, I'm working on the water series, Fred. I'm going to continue on that, but I have a piece that's been in the works for a while, and it's going to be based on the sun. I guess you could talk a bit about global warming. I'm never quite sure exactly what I'm going to make, but I do know what I'm making now. And I won't talk too much about it. I really want to make it. Yeah, it'll be sort of the yin and the yang of the water pieces. I want to do a sun piece.
Since we're here in the Southwest, we get a lot of the sun, so it'll be very appropriate for when you visit us here in Arizona.
Oh, I'd love to do that. But we get a very good dose of sun up here, of course, in the summer. If you remember the first images, the nature where we are is very evident, very powerful, and it does go through lots of change. I like it. I do.
Marie-Helene, did you have any questions that you wanted to cover?
I have a little question for you concerning, I would like you to talk a little bit about the mathematic, for the Coriolis and all the.
Oh,
I like to hear more about this.
She would like to hear a little more about, okay, there wasn't much time left, but I want to say I was reading that book on the divine proportion and the Fibonacci sequence, which you may or may not know of. It's very interesting. It's the numbers go as 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 2 is 3, 2 + 3 is 5, and 3 + 5 is 8, so on and so forth, all the way up. What's interesting about those numbers is when they work out the math. Now, I'm not a mathematician, and I can't really do that. But when you look at how a plant grows, the way the leaves come off the stem and they whirl and they spiral around, they grow on that mathematical sequence. And it turns out it's the most efficient way to expose the most greenery possible to the sunlight. It's the same, and the same mathematical sequence is found in shells. It's found in spirals throughout the universe. And it's just a fascinating thing that somebody could have come up with Fibonacci with those numbers like that. And yeah, and so I've used it in my work, and I used it to create the of course, the body of Coriolis.
How long did it take you to make the beautiful series Chronos, and will we be able to see it in Montreal sometime?
Well, it took me a long time, and I could have used a lot more time to make it because there's never enough time. And no, I don't know if that show will ever go up again. That was quite a few years ago that I mounted that. And I don't do many solo shows because they take so long to produce. They're a huge investment.
All right, and then here's another question. It's an interesting question. How do you know when you're finished with a series?
Well, I never know. I mean, sometimes I'll put a series down, I won't touch it for 5 years, and I'll pick it up again after 5 years, 6 years. So I don't think, I think if you're, I consider myself an artist, and these series are often extensions of my thought. And, you know, as you grow and get older, your thoughts change, and you sometimes find things that you can add to your work, I guess. I think that's how I could say it. I don't feel there is any end to them. Don't mistake when I say series that they're not the same as an edition.
Right. No, not the same at all. You're right.
So they're usually, all my pieces are fairly unique.
Right, and you can see that it was a great presentation. And then the last question that I have here for now is, were you inspired at all by the Czech class at Expo 67?
Well, interesting question. I was 15.
Aha.
But I was a Boy Scout, and I found I could get out of high school if I went to Expo 67 and pushed the people in the wheelchairs around to help them exhibit. So I spent the greater part of my last year, well, when was my last year in high school? I can't remember which one it was, but there at Expo 67, pushing people in wheelchairs into the back doors of all the pavilions. And I got to see every pavilion at Expo 67 more than once. And I will say that I was at the Czech pavilion many times, but I can't say if it was what influenced me or not. But perhaps. At 15, you know, I was more interested in getting into the beer garden.
Well, I think I know we wanted to finish by 6 o'clock, so I think we're just about out of time at this point. But again, thank you so much on behalf of all of us for a great presentation.
Well,
and thanks again to Marie-Helene for a great partnership.
Okay, well, nice to see you, and I hope I get to see you again someday. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
everybody. We'll see you in the fall.